This is Alec Debogorski, and you are listening to TNCRadio.live.
And now, broadcasting live from the home of the World Series champion, Houston Astros, this is Building Strong Minds. I'm Tom Kelly, along with Christopher Cortman, and welcome, Dr. Chris. How are you this evening?
I'm doing very well, thank you, and congratulations to you and all of your Houston Asterisks. Sorry, I was going to say asterisks. Houston Astros. I have forgiven them for their past behaviors, and I'm only going to praise them because they have a very, very solid and deep and well-rounded and multicultural and fantastic baseball team.
And city, too. Yeah, we're having a lot of fun here in Houston because we're well invested in the excitement of the game and being big-time fans here, and myself being a lifelong baseball fan. This is pretty cool stuff.
Yes, and is there a big parade?
There was. That happened earlier today.
Oh, good.
Yeah, basically shut down the city. Most of the school districts shut down. It was a big thing, and now they're having the after-party parties at all the local bars. So there you go.
Wow.
Well, it's been a couple of weeks since we've been together, Dr. Chris, and so it's probably worth backing up just a little bit and talking about, we've been talking about the social black belt for a while now, and we've gone through a number of truths that people need to recognize in life so that they can have a more well-rounded life and be able to see life. We take this from a trucker's perspective. So, from a trucker's perspective, they've heard all their lives about getting a black belt and how getting a black belt it would help them physically ward off those who might look to do them harm. How is a social black belt like that?
Well, I would like to think at this point in their lives, there will be a lot less of a need to ward off physical danger, like being attacked or mugged or beat up by the school bully, than a need for a social black belt, which would be about dealing with all kinds of issues in life, like dealing with difficult people, like dealing with loss, like dealing with challenging interpersonal relationships like marriage, or dealing with children, like understanding their emotions, what they mean and how to change them, understanding their behavior and the behaviors of others, learning why do people do what they do and what do they get from it, how to change it. And the truth that we're currently working on, the fifth truth, which is that all behavior requires permission from the self. And as I was talking about in previous airings together, Tom, I learned this in a driver improvement class, that the reason that everyone was in that particular class is not so much because the state trooper made a mistake in pulling us over. It was more because we give ourselves permission to exceed the speed limit when operating our vehicle. And if I'm talking to truck drivers, I know every single one of them, but every one of them has at some time in their career given themselves permission to exceed the speed limit, which of course you and I have, and probably everyone who's listening. But as a result of that, it made me think about so many other behaviors that either I engage in because I give myself permission to, or I do not because I do not give myself permission to. And that can be every decision that you make in the course of a day, including Halloween candy, right? Wherever you go, the first week after Halloween, which this past week was, there's the leftovers of that candy everywhere. And do you give yourself permission to pick up one of those little Snickers bars or Reese's cups? And do you permit yourself to grab a second one? Do you give yourself permission to eat things that you know are not healthy for you? Do you, when you try a particular change in your eating plan, whether you call it a diet or some type of behavioral change, one of the things you have to do, Tom, is you have to retract, as it were, permission to eat certain things because they're not going to be on that new program. Or if you do, you got to assign it points if you're doing Weight Watchers or whatever you're doing. But it changes the way you think because you have to decide what I'm giving myself permission to do and what I'm not.
But ultimately, isn't it my wife's fault because she gave herself permission to leave the candy out where I would eat it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And just for the purposes of this show, where most of the drivers are male, it's always the wife's fault. Okay. And I think you just agree to that now. We'll have a lot happier listeners from this point.
Sure. But I mentioned last week, or last time we were talking about this, and I still maintain that this is probably, for the listener, the least favorite truth.
It could very well be, because what you're really alluding to is it sure is nice to have everything to blame things on, from my childhood to the government to the evil people at the top of the church or of whatever institution, my former business partner, my ex-husband, my girlfriend, whoever it is. It's parents, we have to blame our mothers for some things, but isn't it better to say it's my upbringing that caused this rather than I give myself permission to engage in this particular behavior?
Well, I mean, it takes away the excuse that begins with, I couldn't help it because...
Yeah.
And if you take that away, which ultimately is our number one excuse for just about everything, I couldn't help it because is being taken away from us if we agree that this truth is true.
It absolutely is. And it's one of those things that we can develop early in life. Do I give myself permission to... if you're dating, let's say you're one of those boys in school that has opportunities to date, and there's more than one female interested in you. Do you have permission to kiss another girl that's not your girlfriend? I know your girlfriend's not going to give you permission, but did you decide in your own mind that another person's interested in me? So I'm going to do it. And then say later, I couldn't help it. She was just there and, we just, it just happened. I didn't mean anything by it. And of course, I would always say that I had to give myself permission. And as long as I'm talking about me, Tom, and confessing, my track record was such that I did not cheat on my girlfriends, but I sure flirted a lot with other girls who weren't my girlfriend. And it was like I had this permission in my head to be a flirtatious guy, but not to cross any lines, no kissy face, no touching anything if she wasn't my girlfriend. And I thought, I was doing a pretty good job being faithful because I didn't cross that line. But my girlfriends would disagree with that. They thought that my flirtation was crossing another line.
Got it? No, I understand. They're like that.
They're just like that as a species.
They are. They are. Yeah. I tell you what, let's take a quick break, come back and dive in some more on this. Got more here to unpack. You're listening to TNC Radio.live. It's a Monday night. That means it's time for Building Strong Minds with Dr. Christopher Cortman. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
5 tips for becoming a great truck driver. Being a truck driver is a rewarding career, but being a great truck driver is even more rewarding. Truck driving is not an easy job. It requires hard work and dedication. Truck drivers take pride in the hard work they do. After all, without truck drivers, our grocery and convenience stores would be empty. Whether you're a rookie or a veteran driver, there's always room to improve your skills as a truck driver. Here are 5 tips for becoming a great truck driver. Safety. Truck driving is considered one of the most dangerous jobs in America, so safety must be a driver's number 1 priority. Truck drivers are responsible for keeping their freight, themselves, and other motorists on the road safe. Other drivers on the road may not know the difficulties and challenges truckers face on the road, so truck drivers may have to go the extra mile to ensure everyone's safe on the road. Prioritize health. A truck driver will prioritize their health. After all, taking care of your health can help you have a long-lasting, successful career as a truck driver. It's no secret that truck driving is considered an unhealthy profession. Drivers lack healthy food options, exercise, and a good sleep schedule. Stay compliant with federal regulations. Trucking rules and regulations are monitored by 2 organizations, one at a state level and one at a federal level. The trucking rules and regulations are established at a federal level. Staying compliant with federal regulations is essential for keeping yourself and others safe on the road. It can also save you from getting fines, which in return saves you time and money. Maintain a clean driving record. The best way to avoid traffic violations is to be aware of all the moving and non-moving violations you could get. Certain violations can affect the eligibility to operate a commercial motor vehicle. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration provides a list of violations. If you're issued a citation for FMCSA safety violations, your CDL could be in danger of suspension. Here are some things that can cause you to get a point on your driving record or possibly a suspended CDL. Speeding, following too close, overweight, traffic violation, reckless driving, driving without proper endorsements, logbook errors. Drivers must be aware that any type of violation could result in a loss of their CDL. Balance trucking and home life. The last tip for becoming a great truck driver is balancing truck and home life. Truck driving is hard and demanding work. Becoming a truck driver means spending many hours and days on the road.
Be sure to catch the Truckers Network radio show with your host, Shelley Johnson, weekdays at 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on TNCRadio.live.
Welcome back in TNC Radio.live. Happy to have you with us tonight as we talk with Dr. Christopher Cortman. This is Building Strong Minds. Dr. Cortman, we give ourselves permission to do certain behaviors. Is at some level, is that a learned thing? I mean, are we talking about this is one of those things that starts in the crib, or is it just over time, okay, by now you know better, and yet you still give your permission perhaps to engage in behaviors that are inappropriate?
You know, the answer to that excellent question is we are always evolving in terms of what we give ourselves permission to do and not to do. And you may have a conversation with your mother and say, Mom, you were told 35 times by your doctor not to get up and walk across the room without your walker. And there's Mom, who might have a sheepish smile and say, I don't need that thing all the time. It's just, no, I explicitly remember your doctor saying you're not to walk without it. And it comes down to every last decision, and people are always changing their minds and tweaking that. Like, do I have permission? Let me use some real basic ones in life. You guys out there who are parents, you may have given yourself permission to swear like a truck driver. And then you had twins, or then you had your first child, and your vocabulary magically cleaned up. Dramatically so. Why? How? And the answer is, I don't want to use language like at the table. And it's funny, they didn't know that until somebody says, by the way, I'd like you to meet Reverend Ed. And it's like, oh my God, I've been saying some things.
Right.
And then it's just there's no more permission to speak like I was just speaking 30 seconds earlier. It's an all the time thing. Do I give myself permission to have a drink if I know I'm driving later? And if I do I give myself permission to have a second drink? And it's an all the time thing. Do I have permission? I don't know about you, but I get calls probably 3 or 4 times a week now at a minimum. We want to buy your house.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Right. And now I just, instead of having to deal with this, I have a price in my head that I know they're not going to pay. And I say, yeah, that'd be great. You come up with a check for this and I'll sell it to you this afternoon. And why am I bringing that up? Because I have decided that I do not have permission to sell my house impulsively. So many behaviors are done on impulse. Mm-hmm. Purchases. Do you have permission to make impulsive purchases? Now we have that buyer's remorse thing. It's such a human characteristic, Tom, that people will purchase things without giving it a good thought, without really processing it appropriately, that they give you 3 days to change your mind. And then after that, it's too late. But the point being, do you give yourself permission to make impulsive purchases? Are you one of these guys that comes home and says, honey, you're not going to believe the beautiful boat I bought this afternoon? Or is it a matter of, I don't make any purchases over X number of dollars without consulting my wife, without planning for it, without really rationally preparing and budgeting. And so I have to ask people, do you give yourself permission to yell at your spouse? Because that begins with one time raising your voice. And then it's like, does this fit? Does this work? Is this what we're going to do as a couple? Is this part of our protocol? Because in some cases, that doesn't work at all. Somebody will say, don't you ever raise your voice to me. I won't raise my voice to you, but I'm not going to be yelled at. And maybe they have a childhood where somebody was a yeller or they were traumatized in some way, and they say, not going to do it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it's not... sometimes you give yourself permission to do something until you are instructed otherwise.
That's exactly right.
And then you realize, well, okay, that behavior will not be tolerated. I need to log that into my overall calculator and realize that I no longer can give myself permission to do that because nobody else gave me permission to do that either.
And of course, what we learned as a child is absolutely critical. And we could change that. We can always change that. But it's deeply ingrained in our heads. Tom, I had a really interesting case that's progressing quite nicely. A woman one of her issues is that she is always fearful that something terrible is going to happen to her kids. And, she's got, 14, 12-year-old kids, and she has such a strong fear that something bad will happen to them that she's not enjoying life or allowing them to enjoy life to the fullest, because sometimes she won't allow them, she won't give them permission to do things that, the parent next door would say, yeah, he's a 14-year-old boy, let him go. Let him do that. It's part of his training. It's part of his internship as a young man. He's got to do these things. Well, anyway, as we were digging, we found out that her grandfather was exposing himself inappropriately to her when she was 10, 11, 12 years old, for a time. It wasn't a one-time thing. And here's the worst part of it. I mean, that's bad. That's bad. But the parents, she told them, and they did nothing to stop it. And the grandmother blamed her that she was like trying to seduce or do inappropriate things at age 10 with her grandfather. And so nobody stood in there. Nobody stood up for her. They were all afraid to confront. And the grandmother was afraid to lose him. Like he was a meal ticket and so forth. And so, you know what happened? She developed this tremendous fear. She felt betrayed. She felt unworthy. And she knew that she better protect her children. But this was all going on less than consciously. And now that she knows that this all ties in together, she has to change that, Tom. She has to retract permission to hold them back. And she has to say, this is an appropriate thing for a 14-year-old boy to involve himself in. And she's doing that. It's just a wonderful thing. She showed me pictures today of her son with, 4 or 5 other boys, and they went hunting. And they got like this 9-foot alligator, and they're holding it up proudly. They're going to turn it into shoes and hand baskets and meat, and they're going to, they went hunting. She allowed her son to hunt. That means they had to use like weapons, and an overprotective mom that she was a couple of weeks ago wouldn't have allowed that to happen. And I guess my point is we can get to the bottom of why we do things, but that in and of itself is not necessarily curative. Then we have to change what we're doing by changing permission. We have to say, I'm giving myself permission to let my boys have more breathing room. Let them grow up a little bit.
Well, and that's, I would think that's kind of the hardest type of permission giving to give.
Yeah.
Or to develop. I think it's a lot easier to interrupt, the yelling at your wife stuff. You can immediately see the negative payoff of yelling at your wife, because she yells back and things get messy and there's turmoil and all that. But these things where by not allowing it's not as easy to see the result, so it's easier to give yourself the permission because you don't see the long-term ramifications of a particular behavior.
And that's true with what we eat. It's true with smoking. Mm-hmm. It's true with drinking. I mean, so many of these behaviors take an awful long time before we see negative consequences. I mean, how long does a person have to smoke before they start having, cardiac or respiratory issues or cancer? The answer is a long time, often, quite a while, quite a lot.
Right. Yeah. All right. Hey, let's take our bottom of the hour break, and we're going to be back in just a couple of minutes. You're listening to TNC TNCRadio.live. This is Building Strong Minds with Dr. Christopher Cortman. We'll be right back. Stay right there.
About children quite a bit. And he said, children are very astute observers, but they draw erroneous conclusions about what they've observed. Therefore, they need adults to help them translate what they're witnessing and to put a good perspective on it. Case in point, years ago, a 4-year-old boy watched his father in the backyard swimming pool going headfirst down the slide into the water. When he hit the water, his hairpiece came off. Nothing was said. It was not a big deal. But several weeks later, at the boy's birthday party, everyone was going down that same slide into the pool. The boy's father challenged him to go head first and even pushed him. And all the way down the slide, he screamed, "No!" Great tears. When he finally hit the water, he was hysterically crying. The father said, "What's wrong? What's wrong? You've been down the slide 1,000,000 times." And he said, "I don't want my hair to come off." Excellent observation, quite astute, but an erroneous conclusion. So what do we do with that? We ask children what they're thinking. We find out how they're processing things. We give them the opportunity to feel safe to tell us what's on their mind. And wherever it's necessary, we correct their thinking. We give them more accurate information, and information that helps them to feel safer and better about themselves. And then hopefully they'll be able to keep their head and keep their hair.
At Hotshot Secret, we share the science behind common diesel problems. For example,
diesel fuel cetane levels.
the cetane rating in diesel fuel is 42 to 45. Most diesel engines operate more efficiently with a cetane rating of 48 to 50. One treatment of Hotshot Secret Diesel Extreme will raise your cetane 7 points, increase fuel economy, and improve cold starts.
Hotshot Secret Diesel Extreme is available nationwide at truck stops, fine farm and auto stores, and online at hotshotsecret.com. Hotshot Secret, powered by science.
Welcome back in TNCRadio.live. We're talking with Dr. Christopher Cortman. This is Building Strong Minds. I'm Tom Kelly. So, Dr. Chris, we were just chatting off the air a little bit, and I was laughing about your reaction to those who call you up and say, "Hey, would you like to sell your property?" And for me, I give myself permission to loudly huff and puff and hang up the phone on them because I'm so tired of those calls. The other ones I'm really tired of, this being, as we tape this one the night before Election Day, I'm really glad that I'm not going to get any more phone calls after tomorrow of, would you vote for this person, that person, does, hi, I'm candidate Smith, and I'm here to tell you why you, and,
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so done with it. So done with the commercials and everything. So I tend to give myself permission in certain circumstances to act more rudely than normally I would because I feel like they're intruding in on me. So I don't have a problem giving myself permission to be rude back, if you will, to them.
Yeah, and that's the point we were discussing off the air is, even that behavior comes down to what do I permit myself to do? You can see it with people at a restaurant. If a server messes up 2 or 3 times, some people have no problem just berating, a 16-year-old girl or a 19-year-old pimply-faced boy, and they just tear them a new one. And I'm horrified by that, thinking these kids are already so socially anxious. And do you really permit yourself to say those kinds of things? I mean, they may never forget how you tore them up. And for me, behavior has to pass my own kind of personal inspection. And so I have to say, if somebody is irritating what is it that I want to do about that? How is it that I want to handle that? Because my behavior is always about me. And if I give myself permission to be mean to another human being, is that appropriate? When is that appropriate? I mean, each one of us has to address that. We all have to make a decision as to how we're going to express our frustration, our hurt, our anger. Do you even have permission to be passive aggressive to somebody? Some people would never say an unkind thing, but geez, will they be passive aggressive? They don't return your phone call. There's something of yours that they have that you're asking for. And they make it impossible by being so either just inconsiderate or deliberately mean, not by what they do, but by what they don't do, which is what passive aggression is. A wife who doesn't say a mean thing to you, but then she doesn't talk to you for 3 days. I heard that today too, where the husband said, how long is this going to go on? When are you going to talk to me again? The silent treatment thing. And I would say to you, the silent treatment, like everything else, begins with permission. Permission from the self that says, no matter what he says or does, I'm not saying a word to him. I am going to make him squirm and apologize and bring flowers or whatever. But, all of that requires permission from the self.
Well, if that's the way you feel about it, that's fine.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Yes, I have been familiar with the concept of passive aggressiveness for most of my life, and it's well, yeah. We could do a whole show on that. Just talking about that stuff.
We certainly can. There's plenty of material on passive aggression. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's a hard one to deal with, especially if you don't realize that it's happening.
Yes,
it's better if you realize it's happening, but it's impossible to deal with if you don't even realize that's what's happening. And the funniest thing I find about those who are passive aggressive is that they would swear in court that they are not.
Yeah,
it's a set of learned behaviors that it's how they interact with the world, and they would never. If you said, "Do you think?" and describe the behavior, do you think it's okay to act that way? They was absolutely not. I would never okay that, and I would never act like that.
Mm-hmm. Or they might just take the fifth and not say a word.
Or they might, yes, exactly.
Yeah. But, one of the things we have to talk about is, so what if we have been giving ourselves permission to yell at our children, and then we realize, boy, it's just not helpful and it hurts them and it's not a behavior that I'm proud of. How do we retract permission?
Yeah, that's good. Because that's not an easy thing to do, I would think, because isn't that kind of one of those, once you cross the line, walking back to the other side of the line is a bit difficult?
It's definitely more difficult than if you were never a yeller. When I have a hard day, it never occurs to me to stop on the way home to get a bottle of something. It never occurs to me to stop at the wrong side of town and buy some crack or something. For some people, it is so difficult to not do that because that's already in their heads as this is something that, that I can do to alleviate my pain, my frustration, my stress, my difficult day. And, it wouldn't occur to me to do that because I've never done it. And so it's not so much that I said today, I'm not giving myself permission to stop and buy a buy crack cocaine. I wouldn't even know where to go to get it. You know, there was nothing heroic that happened in my day where I resisted that temptation or I retracted permission. I never had permission in the first place. So one of the first things we would want to say is when you're raising kids, help them to not make those poor decisions in the first place. You know, I don't necessarily think I have a handle on that, but I told my kids, if you can make it to 18 without smoking anything or drinking anything or drugging, I will give you $1,000. And they think that that's so much money. And they're already, they always count it. Well, I have $1,000 coming from dad. I'll just have to turn 18. But you know what? I can justify that. I can totally justify that because we have research that says the earlier that you engage in a certain behavior, the more likely you are to have a problem with that behavior. You know, you're more likely to become alcoholic if you drink when you're 13 than if your first drink is at 21. And, you know, you don't have a lot of people smoking cigarettes for the first time when they're 27. You pretty well have to do that in your teens if that's going to be a problem, if that's going to be an issue. There are occasional differences and exceptions to the rule, but the rule is to engage in those kinds of behaviors. Normally, we're doing that during those years. And so I guess before we talk about retracting permission, it's great to not give yourself permission in the first place, you know, to kiss somebody who's not your wife. Because once you do that and you cross that line, it's very easy to go from kissing that person to having sex with that person to having a full-blown affair with that person. And then it's harder. It's harder to retract permission because you're in pretty deep. It's easier to not go there in the first place, to say, nope, I had better be divorced before I kiss anyone else. So, you know, what occurred to me years ago when I was writing this first book, you know, Your Mind and Owner's Manual, that the Social Black Belt emerged from, was a biblical story. And for those who are not Bible people or don't want to hear anything about religion, forgive me. That's actually pretty good. Forgive me. It says it right in the book you don't like. Forgive. But this is a biblical story that impressed me. And the story goes that there's a woman who is about to be stoned to death, not in the fun way, but with real rocks by people because she was unfaithful to her husband, as the story goes. And I don't know a lot of details, like how many lovers or partners or whatever, but she was caught and she was going down. And my understanding of the story is that Jesus walks up to the crowd and says, "What's going on?" And they say, you know, this woman has been unfaithful. And, you know, she's going to be killed for that. And, you know, they're about to throw out the ceremonial first stone. And Jesus says, hey, I got a great idea. Why don't we let the first stone be thrown by a person who has no sin? You know, somebody who's lived a pretty perfect life up till this point. And I guess people start checking their cell phones and Apple Watches and decide they got to go. They got lunch meetings and such. And, you know, one by one, everyone disappears. And it's just Jesus and this unfaithful woman. And he says, "Woman, where are your accusers?" And I would imagine she gave a sheepish grin to say, you know, you kind of chased them all away. And he said, and a lot of preachers love this line, "Neither do I accuse you." But then he went one step further. And I really like this because this is the point of the story. He said, "Go and sin no more." And what I really like about this is that he told her essentially with those several words that you have been giving yourself permission to invest in some very shady behaviors here that almost got you killed. Good thing I walked up. Now I'm going to ask you to retract, to rescind permission to do that again. He didn't say, I want you to go get some help. He didn't say there's a 12-step group down the block, or, there's a support group online. He said, quit doing what you're doing now. Stop it now. Do not ever do that again. Last time, that was the last time. Quit it. And that was intriguing to me, because the way, if Jesus was, the Son of God or some incredibly enlightened human being, how could he say that? I mean, doesn't he know that changing behavior requires a little bit more than just saying, stop doing that? But, that's where it begins. We have to say, I can't do that anymore. I don't want to do that anymore. That's not okay. I have heard stories of people stopping drinking, smoking, whatever, because a family member says something like, Mommy, you stink. I don't like it when you smoke. Please stop. And it's a 4-year-old kid. I've heard fathers embarrassed by their children talking about how they treat their mothers or what they're like when they're drinking, and just a decision made. I'm not going to do that anymore. Not going to. I had a man come in, and his wife read this long thing of what it was like to be married to him. And he was silent through this whole session until the very end, when she finished all the things that she didn't like. And he said, okay, I get it. I will change. And much to the amazement of this therapist and that wife, he made significant changes instantaneously, because she called him on some of the worst of his behaviors. And it's impressive what people can do just by making a decision that is unacceptable behavior to continue in. Are you willing to keep trash mouth when your kid confronts you and says, Dad, it's embarrassing the way you talk to Mom? I don't even want to be around you in public when you start berating my mother like that. Are you willing to, even if you're an adolescent and you have that disrespect towards an adult, towards your teachers, towards a principal, and somebody says, no more. That's no good. That's unacceptable. You will not talk to any adults like that again. Not now. Not if I have any say. Can somebody change it on the dime like that? And the answer is very often people can make that kind of change, that this is no longer acceptable behavior. That will not happen again.
Exactly. And I think we all have examples in our lives where we've either seen that change in others or made that change ourselves. So it can happen. It's not impossible. And again, the whole bit of, but I couldn't help it. Yeah, well, yeah. All right. Hey, we're going to take one more break, come back and wrap things up for tonight's Building Strong Minds with Dr. Christopher Cortman. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
The best GPS for truck drivers. Although there's several GPS apps, it's better for truck drivers to rely on a system that's specifically geared toward their type of work. Smartphone apps lack the ability to show truckers the roads that are inaccessible to trucks. Buying the right GPS for trucking can be tricky and overwhelming. To save you from tons of research and reading reviews, the Truckers Network has listed the best GPS devices for truck drivers in 2020. Check out their website. Here's a brief list. Garmin Dezel 580 LMTS. The Garmin Dezel 580 LMTS is an easy-to-use GPS with hands-free Bluetooth and built-in Wi-Fi. It features customized truck routing for the size and weight of your truck. It also provides helpful predictive route warnings for dangerous curves, steep grades, bridge heights, weight limits, and more. You can find nearby hotels, restaurants, and parking with their Easy Brake planning. This GPS is truly made for the long haul. Other features include customized truck routing, built-in directory of truck and trailer services, Easy Brake planning, and service history log. The TomTom Trucker 620. The TomTom Trucker 620 is a 6-inch GPS navigation device that allows you to get the most out of your driving time. The TomTom Trucker 620 can connect by Wi-Fi, and that lets you update without a computer. It makes calling and messaging easier by providing hands-free calling and smartphone services. It also provides free real-time traffic updates and truck maps throughout North America. Other features include battery lifetime up to an hour. It reads messages out loud from a smartphone. It's compatible with Siri and Google Now. It has customized truck routing. The Garmin Drive Smart 61 LMTS. This Garmin device makes trucking much easier. The Navigator features a collection of smart features, in addition to easy-to-follow instructions and helpful driver alerts. It also provides hands-free calling, live traffic information, and built-in Wi-Fi. With this GPS device, all you have to do is look up and drive. Other features include voice-activated navigation, Bluetooth calling, select live parking, and a rechargeable lithium-ion battery that lasts up to... As a professional driver, the engineers at Front Lane know that you remain focused on the road regardless of weather and traffic conditions. That's not always true of the drivers behind you. Every 9 minutes, another commercial vehicle is rear-ended by a driver failing to control their speed. And guess who gets the blame? When you have to brake quickly, Tailbone illuminates a series of bright LED lights that allow the driver behind you to react up to 50% faster. Using amazing accelerometer technology and a battery that will last for years, Tailbone meets the standards set by the NHTSA and the FMCSA. Learn more by visiting www.frontlane.com/tailbone. That's www.frontlane.com/tailbone. Approved in all 50 states, it's Tailbone by Front Lane.
Welcome back to TNCRadio.live. I'm Tom Kelly along with Dr. Christopher Cortman. This is Building Strong Minds. You know, this is really valuable stuff, Dr. Chris. You should have written a book about this.
I'll make a note of that. Thank you.
Well, wait a minute. According to what I have here, it looks like you did write a book about all of this. Tell us a little bit about that and how people can learn more about the book or get copies of the book and that kind of stuff. I think there's a lot of good stuff here that people might want to follow up on. Tell us more about it.
Well, the original book featuring these 10 truths that comprise the social black belt is a book called Your Mind, an Owner's Manual for a Better Life. And that book was published in 2009 by Career Press. And it features the 10 truths of the social black belt, and it was written for adults. Over the last 2 years, the book has been rewritten for adolescents, and the title is The Social Black Belt. And it's a much more colorful, eye candy type book that was, again, prepared for the purposes of, 9th, 10th, right through senior and high school. And it's a book that can be taught to young people, and they can learn these 10 truths. And there's also an audio version. And how do people get that? Of course, they can get it on Amazon. They can find me at srqshrink.com. And any of the things I've written, they can get a hold of by finding me that way. But, this is a program, or these 10 truths, they're really for humans, for primates. Anybody with an opposable thumb can benefit from that because they're universal truths. And they can be taught for little kids, 2 little kids, they could be taught. I taught seniors in a church. So they were senior citizens and they were also faith-based. They could be taught to divorcees. They could, one of my patients who's a dermatologist said they should put this in medical school. They should teach the physicians these 10 truths. They're very, very practical and useful. It would be great if every kid could learn these 10 truths, but the original book was written for adults. It didn't even occur to me at the time that we should get these to children.
Well, I think my life would have been easier if I had known these 10 truths like this when I was a kid. That's like, now you tell me, I'm almost done. You should have told me this 60 years ago. But yeah, that's all right. Hey, we got about 4 minutes left. How do you want to put a wrapper on tonight's discussion?
Well, we can talk about where we're going next week, if you like. And that would be, we can talk about the 6th truth, which has to do with emotional energy. And as a way to titillate the audience, as it were, I would like the listener to understand that each one of us has a finite supply of emotional energy. It is not infinite. We only have so much to expend in the course of a day. And in my mind, therefore, it is the most precious of all the commodities. Most people will run out of emotional energy before they run out of money in this world, for instance. And even the most wealthy and powerful people will run out of days before they run out of their money and their power. And the real question is, what do we do with that finite supply of emotional energy? And in the 6th truth, I like teaching people that there are ways to waste that energy. And if we equate it with money, and I think it's such a wise comparison, if we equate emotional energy with money and we have a daily stipend, an amount that we can spend, how do we best use today's emotional energy? And we're going to get into the 3 major ways that people waste their energy, and then also how to make emotional energy very useful and productive.
And is there a way to regain emotional energy?
I like to think it as almost as one of those phone commercials where there's no rollover minutes. Like whatever, when the sun sets on today, which it already has, but Monday, November 7th at midnight, you are done with this day. And whatever you did with your emotional energy is now done. It's moving into Tuesday, November 8th. And then we better use our emotional energy wisely on Tuesday, because we all find out that life is short and it's finite. And how did we spend our time? How did we spend our days? And in this case, how did we spend our emotional energy? What did we do with that most precious of commodities?
Yeah, makes good sense. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to that discussion already. So we'll be back next time. TNCRadio.live. Dr. Christopher Cortman. This is Building Strong Minds. Building Strong Minds. Building